So I'm here today to talk to you about costume. I've been working with costume for over a decade now. Various different forms, theatre, dance, even a little bit of fringe opera, which was interesting. But I'm here today to talk to you about a different kind of practice, a self-driven practice, a more experimental practice that I've been developing through my research, my practice as research at Central. I've had the opportunity to be able to explore costume, which doesn't have to respond necessarily to the dictates of a director, of a choreographer. Because quite often, within performance, in costume, the production model can be very hierarchical. And creatively speaking, costume is quite often seen as serving the vision of the director or the choreographer, the creative man normally on top. What I've been exploring is a mode of costume, a form of costume as artistic practice, as opposed to artistic facilitation. And I want to argue that that's quite queer, that's quite disruptive, and that's something that I want to explore more, and that's something I want to invite others to explore with me. So, in a standard production, most of the productions I've worked in as a costume professional, I will be commissioned to do a number of costumes for a production. I'll have a production brief. I'll be told, you're costuming this, and this. Okay, thank you very much. Go away. Make a list of the different attributes that I need to be able to communicate about each character. That's pretty standard practice. That's the first thing you'll do. You'll take your text away. Or certainly that's how I've been instructed, and how I do it, how a lot of my contemporaries do it. You take your text away, you analyse your text, you pull out notionally empirical facts about each character from your textual analysis. And you interweave that with other aspects, stylistic elements, different thematic bents. But ultimately, the question that drives a lot of costume design and development, certainly in my experience and from what I've observed in the work of others, is a question of who is this person? Who is this character? I want to argue that that's a question. Is that a question anyone can really answer? Are we ever one person? Are we ever the same person even from one day to the next? If you could give a representation of yourself, as we do every day, we get dressed, we decide what we're going to wear, how we're going to present ourselves. If a costume designer were to take a biography of your life, would they dress you the way that you're dressed? I don't know. What would that say about you? How would you feel about that? There's a kind of objectification to it. What I want to propose is a mode of costume practice which displaces or decenters this sort of universalizing view of what the language of clothing should be. There is a language of clothing. We do have languages of clothing. That language has different syntax and different articulations in different places, different times. There are languages of clothing, but they're not universal. They're positional, they're subjective. But with the growth of screen media especially, we're seeing a lot of costume design which is trying to appeal to sort of a broad palette, a broad notion of what different types of people should look like. And clothes do that. They sort of facilitate and encourage an approach to other individuals, other human beings, where we might look at them and make snap judgments. The first impression, they say, is really important. And it is. And so much of that is based on clothing. And that's one reason why costume is so important. We're representing identities. But what if we explore a form of costume that doesn't necessarily have to represent identities? What if we explore a mode of costume which looks at the subjective positionality, the experience, the haptic qualities, the moments of exchange, the electricity between individuals as a mode of narrative interpretation? Do we always have to take a text and pull it apart into modular aspects of identity, determined according to the politics of the day, essentially, the dominant politics of the day? And those are always going to be positional. They're going to be subjective. How we represent a middle-class, working white woman in Sussex, where I live, is going to look quite different to middle-class working woman, white working woman in South Africa. Maybe, who knows? But there are geographical variations. But so much of the time, costume, clothing, the way that we pull these characters apart is entirely subjective. What I want to propose is a model of costume which owns that subjectivity, which owns costume as an artistic, creative practice, an expressionistic form of costume practice. Who wants to be making snap judgments about people we've never met, we don't know? Why would we want to do that? Maybe to sell movies, I don't know. But there's so much room for expansion, for development of different forms of costume, different forms of artistic practice. Yes, naturalism is dominant now. Does it have to be? Does it have to stay dominant? Can we challenge that? Can we have a resurgence of expressionism? Might be fun. That's largely why I'm here today, to ask you, to join me in a surge of expressionism. Forget purports to reality. Reality is wherever you are. That's your reality. It's not my reality. It could be. So here today, as a costume practitioner, I want to say, and as a costume practitioner and an individual who's often been marginalized by these normative standards, these standards of the norm, what's normal. We think about these things as common sense, but what's common? What's normal? Where does that leave the rest of us? Who are the rest of us? What's one? What's the other? If we start to explore and embrace costume as an expressive medium, we can start to explore different pleasures, different perspectives, different modes of expression. And I think that's exciting. I think that's really exciting. I mean, just look, for example, at the way that people of colour have been represented in performance throughout history, through costume. It's appalling. Women, gay people, transgender people, people of faith even, Let's make a change. Let's try and do performance in a way that, okay, we can't leave those politics behind. We can't leave them behind. They're a part of our world. But isn't it worth trying to explore a kind of expressionism which can maybe, if not transcend, then transgress those iniquities? So, what I'd like to ask you here today, be you performance makers, be you be you theatre goers, be you people on the internet who have found yourself in a very strange place indeed. I want to ask you, engage with costume as to its full potential. There's so much there. There's so much there. It is the material medium between the body, the spaces around it, and between bodies as well. It doesn't have to be so phallogocentric. It doesn't have to be a visual tick box of what kind of person this is. Why can't it be an expression of the electricity between people, the spite, the feeling, the anguish? Why can't we approach costume as a sculptural and tactile and feeling medium? Does it have to be about words? Or can it be about feelings? Can it be about things which are maybe more than words, which can't be expressed through words? If you can treat costume as a form of three-dimensional art, or even four-dimensional art, how much more worth can we bring to it? Thank you very much.